I realized pretty young that all I wanted to do was tell stories. It was probably the driving force behind even wanting to be an actor. And then I think after years and years and years of excavating other stories and doing all this research to play all these characters, I was just so hungry to tell stories that were in my heart. I was an odd kid. I was artistic and I was in all the theater stuff, but I wasn't very social. And so I was kind of always on the outside looking in. So I think I was always inventing the story in my head as I was watching as a person anyway. So then when I started acting, it felt so comfortable to tell someone else's story because that was easier to try on than my own story at the time. It was really in college that I started directing theater, and that I really loved that. And then it was intimidating to think about the technical aspects of filmmaking. So I started just diving in every set that I was on, asking millions of questions. And it was while I was working on Once Upon a Time that I was sort of isolated in Vancouver, and I was working on that show for so long. And I think that's when it was just, it clicked inside me that it was time. I just had to start telling my own stories. When I was younger and I started traveling all the time for work as an actor, films were my friends. I was taking my Criterion Collection DVDs with me and stuff, and watching and rewatching The Graduate, and watching and rewatching Breakfast Club. And I was very, very lucky because there were a handful of people in the industry that were noticing my hunger for more. And one of the people who's been incredibly instrumental in my directing career and my cinema studentness, if that's a word, is Brian Burke. And he is an extraordinary producer. I met him when I was in the Star Trek movie that J.J. Abrams directed. He could see that hunger in me, and he started just sending me foreign films. And it was, Ratcatcher and Jules Jim, Man and a Woman, and Scenes from a Marriage. And then when I knew I wanted to do Warning Labels and I wanted to make my first short film, I did feel like I had to take the student of it all very seriously. This was basically the start of my film school, Conversations with Scorsese, and it was an interview with Richard Schickel, and it's 400 pages of pure interview. Scorsese is such a lover of cinema and such a great kind of natural educator. What I was trying to do with Warning Labels, I was trying to do a little bit of everything because I wanted to try everything. And so I was thinking about shots that had really moved me. And one of the sequences that really, really stuck with me is this scene in Scorsese's student film.
The what?
The Searchers. It's a movie made about 11 years ago. And that picture of John Wayne is from that movie.
There's this incredible scene that is mostly in one take. There was no room for error, and you were always exactly where you wanted to be when it was happening. And it's his student film. I mean, it's so extraordinary that someone was already thinking that way and designing that way so early in their career. So that really stuck with me, the power of the magic that came out of the unbroken moment. With Warning Labels, that opening sequence was definitely, that was in my mind of like, I don't want to break this moment of being with this singular point of view with this character. And then the other moment I wanted to use it was when she was on the floor with Gil at the end. It was designed to actually be a oneer, and we didn't have the right gear for the right space. But originally, that was the thought, was to try to have something like that there. I'm always looking at the emotion that I'm trying to convey, and then I work backwards from that to go, how can I make a visual decision that's going to offer that? And with Sundogs, I would get in the edit, and I always felt like things got more emotional when there was just a little bit of texture added. And there's these little ways that you get information about people, and sometimes it is the way that they pick up a glass, or the way that they wash a dish, or the shoes that they chose that morning, or it's a quick way to give someone a lot of information about a person. And so sometimes I overshoot that stuff now just because I want to have it there in case I want it, or in case the scene needs it. I'm a hands person in real life, you know. I think because I have been a performer most of my life, I can really hide a lot. I can make sure people see what I want them to see. And if you're curious what I'm actually feeling, you should look at my hands. You know? It's like I'll be stressed and no one knows it, but I'm like holding my coffee cup so tight, you know? And so I'm very aware that my hands give me away in a way that I probably look at other people's hands the same way.
She kind of looks at everything with a telescope and a microscope. Jennifer's a very strong visual director and really understands the script in a way that was amazing. Like I think all of her years as an actress, I think have really helped her to be able to pick apart and dissect the tone and pace within a scene.
I think that a television director in particular has a very challenging job, which is to parachute in to a production oftentimes that's already, you know, moving, has to parachute in and be handed a baton potentially by another director, and has to somehow, and I mean that, I don't know how they do it when they're good, somehow find a way to carry that baton while also figuring out a way of infusing their own vision into it.
I think from an emotional standpoint, there are things in Sundogs that tell you I can direct Euphoria. I think that from a decision-making standpoint, in terms of having to walk really fine lines with difficult content, or potentially difficult subject matter, I guess is how I should phrase it, yes. Then there was an emotional resonance in what I did with Sundogs that would say, this person will take great care with these things in Euphoria. But Euphoria is such a robust television show in terms of its visual movement. And I had never worked with A, the budget that I was working on in that show, and B, just all of the gear. And the education that I got working with all of that gear and working with that crew and working with Sam Levinson, who dreamed up all of that stuff with Marcel Rev, it was a priceless education.
I don't know why Jules didn't trust me, or why she'd think I'd ever hate her. There's literally nothing in the world that Jules could do to make me upset.
There was a scene where we came up and over a wall, and we started super high, so the roof had to be off, but I really wanted to end the shot really low, which meant then we were gonna see the missing ceiling. And so I was like, oh great, so we'll just put the ceiling on hinges. And then we had a whole rigging system to be able to hinge the roof in, but that all has to be timed out. You know, not only are you timing the crane move, then you're timing the hinging of the ceiling at the exact right time, and the actors being in exact right spots so that, you know, maybe only 3/4 of the ceiling is down and you can't see the other fourth, and you know, so it's always like a jigsaw puzzle of working out all the technical stuff. The Key Grip has done a lot of work with P.T. Anderson, so, you know, talk about movement-driven storytelling. Anytime I dreamt up something that I was like, this will be really cool, I have no idea how we're gonna do it, but this will be cool, you know? Like, we'd draw it out with the storyboard artist, and then I'd be like, hey, so Kunkel, if we wanna do this, what do we need? You know, and he'd be like, well, we could do this, or we could do this. I know now exactly what remote head I want to use based on the feeling I want someone to have in a scene. I know certain crane arms are going to give me a different experience of movement. I know certain things are going to be floatier and certain things are going to be jerkier. Euphoria was interesting because I felt incredibly trusted by Sam to dream up what I dreamt up, but he really let me do what I came up with, which was unusual, I think. I don't think that every television show runner would have that faith in someone and give them that space to do what Sam gave me the space to do. But I know he also trusted that I was studying the show. I was watching all the dailies. I was asking a million questions. I was talking to every crew member. I was, making sure that what I was dreaming up was within the language of what he was looking for.
At the beginning, as we were setting up Dr. Death, I got the opportunity to meet with Jennifer. And she had just come off of doing a pilot for the NBC Universal family. She had done an episode of Euphoria. They had sent me Euphoria to watch before Jennifer and I sat down to meet, and I was completely blown away by it. And so Jennifer and I had lunch together. She came with these extraordinary ideas for the first few episodes that she had read. And look, I'm very much a writer, right? Like I don't know how to direct. And Jennifer began to throw out all of these terms of like what she was going to do with lenses and with with dollies and with all of steady cams. And while I get it, I didn't get it. At the time, I remember thinking, if she doesn't actually understand what she's saying, she certainly acted the hell out of that lunch. And I can report back that she, in execution, knew exactly what she was doing. And both of those episodes really have the fingerprint of all of her talent on it.
Some shows are very strict about this is how we do things and that's it. And then there's also shows where they're looking for you to evolve the visual or bring something new out because of those particular episodes. And I definitely felt that with Patrick McManus with Dr. Death, because he always looked at episodes 3 and 4 as their kind of own movie a little bit.
I think we definitely felt a lot of independence being able to work on the sort of 2-episode block together with the same director and same director of photography, because we had time to find a bit of the poetry and find a bit of the extra aesthetic bump that a lot of times on TV you just don't have time for. Joshua Jackson was very generous with us, and we did a lot of takes from a lot of different angles, and we had basically started big and kept moving in, and found movement to add in where we could, just to give Jennifer and the editor options in the edit room to be able to control the pace of it. And it was also interesting because it was Jennifer and my first day on set ever together, so it's always a sort of balance of figuring out how the other person communicates on set after you've been working in an office for a couple of weeks. There was an episode shooting while we were prepping, and someone in the episode that was shooting got COVID. So in order for the production not to completely stop, the producers came and asked Jennifer and I if we could come in early, like a week or two early during our prep, and shoot that. And we identified that as something we could do because at least it was contained in a set that already existed. So yeah, that was a hard day, but a fun day. And I'm happy with how it turned out. And I mean, so much of it, the credit goes to Joshua. He knew his character so well. And Jennifer also, from watching dailies and having seen everything that had been shot so far, really knew how to bring him up and take him down in the correct spaces, and just sort of figuring out the pacing of how he would find the things he was finding. And we could build the sequence of his sort of anxiety and paranoia and desire for more cocaine, how to get that on screen.
Josh Jackson is an incredible performer, and he's lovely, and we've known each other a very long time, which really helps in situations like that. And I do feel very, very lucky that as a filmmaker, I spent so many years as an actor, because I know what I would want from someone if I were in their shoes. But I felt like for the most part, we just had a very open dialogue, and he's just so prepared that I don't feel like I did a tremendous amount. I do think, though, there were times where, you know, he'd look at me and be like, man, I'm just not feeling it today. And I was like, great. I roll up my sleeves and we get in there, you know, and we just dig until we start to find things that would kind of trigger certain feelings in him or trigger certain thoughts. And, you know, it's really fun to work with an actor who has that much vulnerability with you as a director.
Fuck! She not only challenged me, but she challenged Josh and Alec and Christian and Anna Sophia and Grace and Dom and everyone. But she did it in a way that you could tell that she wants to be treated as an actor, right? There was a certainty to her direction, but a certainty that wasn't infallible, right? You know when a director is an actor's director and when a director is a visual director, right? Jennifer happens to be both.
By the time he walked in the bathroom, I was like, I don't want there to be any doubt that this is for sure not a real situation. I had seen in one of my deep dive rabbit holes of watching random films for research, there is this film, Female Prisoner 701. There's a sequence where this girl is attacked and they shot the whole sequence from under the floor. And so the beginning of my thought process for that scene was, what if we're under the floor when we see him hit the floor? So that was kind of the beginning of the impossible bathroom. And then I started thinking, well, if we're under the floor when he hits the floor, maybe we're always somewhere kind of impossible. You know, what if we build a space where every shot is not somewhere that feels like you could be standing across from someone, and every shot is sort of orchestrated to include some sort of impossible element.
Dr. Christopher Dunch.
You pull the mirrors out and you kind of are disoriented and don't really know where you are. And it was always trying to find ways to constantly keep Alec's character in the mirror with Josh, even though it was an impossible angle for that to happen because we'd so hyper-angled something.
You're the one who turned me into the Texas Medical Board.
I am.
Jennifer called it the impossible bathroom. The idea was that the audience at home shouldn't know that anything is wrong, that it isn't, that they shouldn't know it's a fantasy until they get into the bathroom.
From the beginning, we knew that that was going to be sort of a hill to climb. And we started with the technical departments like the grips and electrics to sort of figure out how we were going to move the camera, and working with production designer also to figure out how much space we would have underneath the bathroom, and figure out what material we could use that would keep the fidelity of the image, but also be able to support the weight of the actors was interesting. And then sort of planning for how we would light a scene where we would see everywhere, including straight up into the ceiling, and also be able to complete the shots that Jennifer wanted on a TV schedule, which is usually very fast.
The only time where that bathroom came into question was budget. And I'll be honest, I began to waver because I was told we didn't have the ability or the time to be able to make that bathroom. And Jennifer, and I mean this in all seriousness, with all respect to the production, said, we need that bathroom. When I say she fought for it in an extraordinarily polite and respectful way that we couldn't possibly say no to. And that shot under that bathroom floor is one of the most stunning things in the entire series.
I remember calling Matt Munn, who's the production designer on Dr. Death, and I was like, hey, Matt Munn, I know you haven't met me, but we're going to build an impossible bathroom. And he was like, what? But we talked through it, you know, and I talked about under the floor, we talked about through the mirror, we talked about finishing both sides of things, we talked about being able to gimbal all the mirrors so we could get these kind of weird reflections that didn't seem possible. This bathroom moved in so many configurations until we got to what we got to. And then I looked at Matt Munn and I said, we just redesigned the Shining bathroom.
Were you there? Oh,
And The Shining was something that Patrick did intentionally reference for sure. And the eeriness of that scene is definitely something that we talked about tonally quite a bit for this scene as well.
Right there.
One of Us is Lying is based on a novel, and when I met on that project, what occurred to me was like, everyone else is gonna pitch that this is gonna be like dark murder mystery, you know, kind of eerie. And I was like, what if it's fun? And like, what if it's bright? It seems like a weird reference, but Jaws came to mind because it's set in a picturesque town that's like sunny and beautiful, and you're supposed to want to go on vacation there. There just happened to be a killer shark.
Like all good artists, I think she's constantly trying to move forward and find, you know, where her wants and desires for a scene are and how far she could take something before it starts to fall off the rails or starts to get bad. And I think it's really, she asks a lot of the people that work for her technically. And I think it's a unique experience working for Jennifer because you're constantly challenged in a good way.
And I was thinking of it in terms of like, how do we give people this experience of like, look at this bright, sunshiny place where look at the beach and the ocean and the palm trees and it's light and it's bright, and it's like, but these 4 kids might be murderers, and you're like, what? You know? So I mean, it was a big swing, and there was a world where no one was interested and they didn't want to do it, but it ended up actually really working. And we were shooting the pilot in Vancouver, which doesn't have big, bright, sunshiny light. And so Sharon Mayer, who was the cinematographer on that with me, was like, we're gonna make a bunch of fake light and it's gonna feel weird. And I was like, great, let's make it feel weird, you know? So we leaned into the obstacle and kind of let it feel eerie. It's like when we're shooting in total overcast, but we're blasting with a bunch of BB lights and like filling the sky with warm light. You're like, I don't know what's wrong, but something's wrong.
Congratulations. You're the only 5 students in this entire school who could still get detention every day this year. In my experience, the students who get detention on the first day of school end up here a lot.
A big reference for One of Us is Lying was the Breakfast Club. I mean, we weren't hiding that. I intentionally designed the scene in detention to have them kind of sitting in the same seats that they sat in, you know, to kind of have the shot list be reflective of the shot list of when they first sit down in detention in Breakfast Club. So we were very, very intentionally nodding to that. In watching it over and over and over again, I was like, this is all about music. You know, that film is driven by that great, you know, 80s music of the time. And you have to hold a teenager's attention for a show like this. So I did feel like I needed to very much take seriously the way that we were going to bake music into it and the way that music was going to affect the pacing of things.
I don't doubt myself when I get in my head, when I get in my head, when I get in my, I'm just feeling myself, no, I don't get stressed, no, I don't get stressed.
I grew up a musician. I mean, I grew up playing piano and clarinet and singing. My parents are both music teachers. My brother plays trumpet and was a music teacher as well. My sister's a music therapist and plays like 18 instruments. I don't know that you could ever take the music out of how I approach things, because I think my wiring is to approach something the way I would have approached music. I love working with my directors. I always have, but I feel like it's on a whole other level because I know exactly what they've been through to get there that day. I know that they have a million things on their mind that have nothing to do with me. I know they've probably put out 18 fires and they're pretending like they didn't, and that's so sweet of them. I just have like a real, reverence for anyone who's in the director's chair.
For me, I want a director who is going to remain cool-headed in the face of adversity, because we are always going to be facing adversity on sets. I expect someone who is going to come to the table with really strong point of view. And then more than anything, and I alluded to this before, for me personally, I want a director who is going to tell me that I'm wrong. and be comfortable with doing that. And be comfortable in the reverse of me saying, I may be wrong, but I disagree with that. And, you know, since we're primarily here to talk about Jennifer, I can tell you that she is phenomenal at everything I just said. She ticks each of those boxes.
I think I'm freer. I think that the fact that I've been able to kind of continue working as an actor while I've also been working as a director, I constantly have that muscle like turning, and I feel really strongly that I'd like to write my second feature and find the stories that I feel like not only do I want to tell them visually, but that I want to actually spend the time excavating them on the page. So I'm in that process.